Welcome to Victoria's Nirvana with your host, Victoria Lynn Ravenwood, where it's all about evolving your mind, being creative, and daring to live an enlightened life.
Hello. Today I wanted to talk to you about our April pick for our Victoria's Nirvana book club. The book we are reading is Octavia Butler's Parable of the Sower. This is a book I've read a couple of times over the years, and I've always loved it, and it's been quite a while since I have read it. And I remembered how much I love the book. I love the message that it has, how she's a fictional story to get so much of her personal activism and feelings and philosophy across, which is always wonderful in my eyes. And I had forgotten, though, about all of the violence that was depicted in the book. There's a lot of violence in it. So in revisiting it for a third time, it was very difficult for me to really stay engaged because it was somewhat painful with the torture scenes and the crime scenes. But I think that was probably the author's point for a lot of it, was to really show the potential of what can happen when society collapses, and to really get the reader into that space of seeing how dire the situation is and can be, and where society is heading. This book became quite an outline for activist movements back in the 90s. And these were movements that addressed our collective responsibility to ensure all citizens are cared for, regardless of their status. These were movements that tried to give hope and tried to create a better future, and getting us all to embrace change and the cards that we've been dealt in life. The personal is political is a very strong theme in this book, as well as the idea of God as change. To let go of denial, to accept what has been sown in our lives and work with it, and to also build a society free of an other. Those were the main themes that I found running through the book. And it centers around an ethnic community that lives behind gated walls, and if they leave those walls, they're most likely going to be killed. The adults in the story remember the good old days, and they pretty much seem to be waiting around for things to get better, as if a lot of them are hoping that the government or technology will come along and save them, that they need to get back to the good old days, and they just have to endure until that can happen. So there's a lot of denial that they go through, and the protagonist is a teen girl, and she knows things are not going to get any better, and that they have to face change and move to where they can work in harmony with the times, instead of fighting it, instead of fighting to try and live the way they used to live in the good old days. So she sets out to educate herself, reading all of her father's books, and she develops her own philosophy and religion to support her beliefs. And a lot of African American literature, especially on activism, was inspired by this book. And as a white person reading it years ago, I loved it, and then seeing it, how much the violence is affecting me this time around, I just wondered how much of that is coming from a place of privilege, where a lot of violence and oppression at this kind of level has not been a part of every single day in my life. And that this could very well be a somewhat realistic depiction of how life in some other communities may be, or may be experienced or seen. Like, how do children in poorer communities feel about their environment? Whether it's true or not, you could grow up living with this experience and living in this kind of fear, whether it's 100% true or not. Your imagination can take over. So this book spoke a lot to people who were involved in fighting racism and oppression and otherness, and in showing the worst of people in a fictional story. It gave a platform to express the personal desire to feel heard within these experiences. There is also an underlying message that if we don't help and take care of one another, we will all eventually suffer. And I think this is one of the blessings of the book. Because if we don't contribute to fixing the street lights and making sure there are enough police on the streets and collect the garbage every week and pay for schools whether we have children or not, all these basic things of civilization, then we all wind up living behind walls. The wealthy start living in a prison of their own until finally those walls are torn down and no one has anything. There's also a theme of change within the story, that the only constant in life is change, and that a re-envisioning of God as change will help us to accept the fact that all life is essentially change. The people in the protagonist family are living in the past and waiting for the good old days to come back. They wait for the government or technology to save them, because all they want to do is get back to those days that they remember. They want to get back to the glory days. So they're kind of in this holding pattern, putting up walls, protecting themselves, making this waiting experience as pleasurable as they can, as normal as they can, as like the good old days as they can. And it takes this teenager who has no memory of any glory-filled days to see that you can't sit around and wait for help. You have to embrace your situation, find a way to make the best of it. You have to empower yourself. And her main way of doing this is through educating herself. She's one of the few people who are really, really educated. So she's thinking and piecing stuff together when other people aren't. And when she tries to talk to other people about it, they kind of freak out and they want to stay in denial and they don't want to hear about it because it scares them. And change, of course, we all know, is scary. But being in denial doesn't save you. And in the middle of the book, there's a new town being built far away called Oliver, where some of the people move to because it's a town with armed guards all around it. And there are some low-level jobs that they don't really want there, but many people are just looking for any kind of an answer. And they don't feel they have enough walls of security where they are. But a lot of people don't go because they feel like it's a trap and that they'll lose all their freedom. And of course, all these people wind up getting killed a few chapters later. But the protagonist keeps insisting on going up into the mountains, starting a new community with the new belief system she's developed that will help keep them safe. And that working together with other people will secure a better future for them all, without being trapped. They can't do things that they've always done it, and walled communities just aren't working. So when the walls finally come crashing down in her town, most of the people are killed and she's forced to leave on her own, and she's walking for miles, and she knows what seeds and plants to eat because she educated herself on such things just in case she ever needed that knowledge. And she finds good people to align with and builds a group and starts to live her philosophy. Everyone she gathers comes together and helps each other, each one pooling their resources. One man has acres of land in the mountains, and they all head to it to start their own new society there. They look out for each other while the world is just falling apart around them. And every good person who finds their way to them is welcome to join. So what's absent is the one thing that new societies do when they are built, and that's the creation of an other to be against. People in new societies usually gain their identity by having an other not to be like. By excluding these others, they gain their identity as a group. The protagonist in this story is not doing that. The only others are the sad souls who have lost their minds. The title of the book is very telling too. Parable of the Sowers from Matthew 13 in the Bible. A farmer went out to sow his seed. As he was scattering the seed, some fell along the path, and the birds came and ate it up. Some fell on rocky places where it did not have much soil. It sprang up quickly because the soil was shallow, but when the sun came up, the plants were scorched, and they withered because they had no root. There was no water. Other seed fell among thorns, which grew up and choked them. Still other seed fell on good soil, where it produced a crop, 100-fold. Now, this is from the New International Version of the Bible, and Butler quotes this in the final part of the book, in that we have to deal with the cards we're dealt, and this is what happened. And some people wind up in better places than others, and there's many varying degrees of things being negative and bad. And you have to deal with what you've been dealt. And if you're lucky enough to land in good soil, then it's your job to survive and do the best that you can and continue life. We just have to deal with these cards. And in using this as part of her philosophy, she's come up with a way to rationalize why this is happening in the world, why they're here, why they're going through this, why America's fallen apart. And she's coming up with her own new religious belief system. God is change, and we are all just seeds. Some of us land on rocks, and a few of us are put on solid ground. She's creating a whole new mythology for people. And it shows a lot about how new societies are born. It is very much about surviving, being self-sufficient, creating a community that supports each other. And at the same time, the book is also realistic about the world around these characters, and that they have to reimagine what life can be like, how they can do things better, how they can move forward from where they are instead of looking at the past and waiting for things to go back to the way they were. The protagonist grew up around people who were in denial, and that really parallels a lot of the climate change situation right now. Denial abounds. When this was written in 1993, it was the beginning of climate change awareness, and I'm sure there was a sense that these things were going to affect the poor first. The theme throughout this book is on the total collapse of American society, and a lot of it is due to climate change. The book is sparked an entire series of popular books, and many activists I'm reading right now reference them. So it's worth going back to and revisiting it if you have already read it in high school or for pleasure. It sparked a lot of activism discourse, and many leaders were influenced by it. Unfortunately, many other leaders were influenced by Ayn Rand, so it's good to go back and revisit this book to kind of balance that out a bit. I see how it would spark a lot of activists in poor communities who are already facing a lot of this oppression and violence in their community. Just saying it's only a matter of time could feel cathartic. We are all in this together. And if you don't help the communities around you and be a good citizen for everyone, society is going to come crashing down. The walls of the richer buildings will fall too, and there's not much that anyone can do about it. We reap what we sow. It's definitely an engaging read. It kept me turning pages, but there are a lot of parts I skipped over in this third revisiting of it because the violence was just too much. My empathic nature has gotten a little stronger over the years, and I just couldn't read a lot of the crime and torture that was going on. It's interesting, though, that this is a huge part of the protagonist's life, being deeply empathic. When she hurts someone or sees someone hurt, she feels it deeply. This is probably something that happens to a lot of people who read the book. Their empathic nature gets triggered, and they have an empathic experience while reading it. Empathy is what can save us, and sowing good seeds in the ground. So this may be part of the author's intention as well, is to shock and to trigger that empathic sense, and to have you ponder these questions. So I'd love to know what you thought of the book, and if you think the violence is too much, or if it works for you well. I also have this posted on my Nirvana Activism Mini Mag on medium.com/Nirvana activism, where you can join in a conversation there. I hope you enjoy the book, and if you've read it, like I say, just it'd be good to go back and reread it, especially with current times in mind. Enjoy the day.
Thank you for listening to Victoria's Nirvana. Subscribe and visit victorialynnravenwood.com to sign up for the newsletter.